Craftsmanship for me means that we're working with processes that can't be replaced just by machines or automation or any of the advancements that we're looking at the moment. It's something that requires knowledge, it requires experience, and it requires care.
With whiskey, what we make today might be something that I may never get to drink. It may be in cask for 50, 60, 70 years. There's definitely part of history being put down today that will be there for the future.
The landscape is everything. It's where I get my inspiration from. I use the landscape to create the dye colours that I use in some of my work. And there's so much to see in Scotland. I also think that people make Scotland.
I would say the mill sounds like a train station, with all the steam coming out of all the buildings and all of the running machinery. My name's David Garrow. My role here is Head of Fabric at Johnstons of Elgin. I've been here for 8 years, and my role includes taking care of 4 production departments at the heart of the mill: warping, weaving, darning and purling. The business has been here for 229 years. We are a family-owned business, and we're specialists in manufacturing with cashmere and wool. I feel like we're thoroughly embedded in Scottish textile history whilst we work here, and we're the only mill here that's vertically integrated in Scotland now. And what that means is we're taking the fibre in one end and letting the finished product leave the other end, all on one site. So the Cashmere Johnstons is special, I think mainly because the people that are working with it, along with the environment that we're working in, the people that work here, the people that care about the product, that have spent their lifetimes here learning what it takes to actually produce it. The other side is using Scottish water and being in the Scottish environment, the air that applies something that you can't get anywhere else. The interesting thing for me is that my dad worked here, he still works here. He's been here for 36 years, which was the year that I was born. And that was a huge driver for me to come and work for this business. So in the mill we've got machines that are both older, made of wood potentially, still within production, alongside brand new machines that are trying to push the boundaries of how we manufacture our products in an efficient and consistent way. The process starts with getting the raw material into the wool store. It then has to be broken up, separated, ready for dyeing. When the colour comes up from the dye house, having been dyed for the first time, very often it might not be the right colour on the very first dye because of the variation in the base fibre that we get. The dyer's job is then to add some form of addition to that dyeing that then corrects the shade, and you want to correct it as quickly as possible with as minimal attempts as possible to preserve the quality of the fibre. The longer it's in water, in dyeing, the more damage we're applying, so it has to be quick and it has to be right in the first few goes. After it's been dried, it's then going to move up into the next major stage of production, which is yarn manufacturing, taking the wool and trying to make it into that yarn. The first step of that being teasing and blending, and that's where you've taken quite a compact and dry now bale of wool or cashmere, and you have to separate it so that it's not matted together, it's evenly separated, and that's preparation for the carding phase. It then moves into the carding phase, which is where you're trying to separate and align all of the fibres in one direction, ready to be then pulled into slubbings, ready for the spinning process, which is almost the final process before it becomes yarn. The next stage, once you have your yarn, is to take it into the warping department. The warping department aligns the yarn in the pattern that's required in what we call the warp direction, which would be the long direction of the product on the beam. Once that's on the warp beam, it's then ready to be presented to the weaving loom. The part that takes the most patience is the weaving process, specifically the weaver. The weaver's job is to maintain the quality of the work as it's weaving, and also to repair yarn breaks. The loom will automatically stop, and the weaver then has to go in, identify where the break has happened, and then tie a weaver's knot, and then pull it through, and then start the machine again. The raising operative definitely has a level of instinct that they have to develop themselves. When they're feeling that cloth or that accessory or anything that's going through that machine, they have to make a judgment when they're saying that that's a match and is that enough. And sometimes they have to work together and get the instinct of 2 or 3 people to then say, do we agree collectively that we're feeling the same thing? Because feeling is subjective. Over 30 people can have their hands on the product at any given time throughout that process to make it from raw fibre into a product that's ready for the customer to receive. And that spans over every production department. They're all hands-on processes. One person is not going to master any part of the process in their lifetime on their own. I think that without the previous year's experience being documented and being put into our training programs and having people with long service that are still here and able to talk to us about what used to happen and why we made changes that we've made, it's going to be a collective effort over 200 years and continuing now, always trying to make things a little bit better every year before you could say that you've mastered it.
So one of the beautiful things about Scotch whisky, there's about 150 distilleries in Scotland. They all use the same raw materials. They all have malt, they have yeast, and they have water. They all use casks to finish them, bourbon casks, sherry casks, yet they all come out different. My name is Murdo MacKenzie. I'm the distillery manager at Benromach Distillery. The distillery itself is situated in Forres in Moray, which is on the northeast coast of Scotland, just on the cusp of the Speyside region. So Benromach is one of the smallest distilleries in Scotland. There is only a handful of people that make the spirit themselves. We have 4 distillers, there's myself here as well, and then there's a very small cask team of 6. Benromach Distillery was founded in 1898, ran through the years all the way till 1983. 10 years later, the family of Gordon and MacPhail in 1993 purchased the distillery, and thereafter from 95 to 98 began to bring it back to life. In 1998, they started producing their first single malt spirit. So one of the lovely things about Benromach, it has kept that heritage about it. It has kept the traditional aspects about it. It is a distillery that is run just by hand. Every aspect of it doesn't start until one of the distillers starts a process. The barley is grown locally. It has to be grown in Scotland and it has to be malted in Scotland. That's one of our strongest points for our distillery. So once the malt's arrived and it's in the malt bin, we'll then put it through the bobby mill, which will then roll it down to what we need, and then it'll be ready for mashing. The bobby mill is special to us because it is a fantastic piece of equipment. It's over 110 years old. The next step for us is the mashing. This is where we combine that now milled malted barley, now called grist, and hot water, the water from the spring. Well, the water source for us comes from a spring called the Chapelton Springs, and that is about 1.5 miles away from the distillery. Water is really important in all aspects of distillation and in brewing as well. But for us, water has to be soft, and Scotland provides the best soft water. From here, the distillers on site, by hand, will open valves, switch on pumps, and start the mashing process. And at this point, it's really crucial the temperature is there. They're after 64.5 degrees, and that is where the starch that's inside the grist will turn into sugar. As they transfer it across to the washbacks, you'll see that part of the pipe in the distillery that has been polished by all the hands that have touched it as they take it across. We will then ferment it for 3 to 5 days. This gives us a rich, fruity character. From there, it will then go through the stills where we will get a medium-bodied character finish from the distillation, which will then add in the complexity to it. So we have a lovely hint of smoke, we have cereal notes, and we have the fruity characters just coming from the distillation. Thereafter that, we're relying on the casks. The casks will give it that really rich sherry influence or the ex-bourbon finish. Once the spirit's ready to be filled into casks, what the team at the distillery will do first is they will take the casks, they'll weigh them empty, stencil them, and then weigh them full. These casks will then be rolled across to the warehouse where they'll be kept for 10, 15, 21, however long we want to keep them in the warehouse for. The best part of the job is absolutely making the spirit and seeing the whole process from start to finish. It takes time, that's really important. We're not in a rush here to make whiskey. Whiskey isn't just made in one day. It takes at least a week before it's even ready to go into the stills, and thereafter it can be multiple years until it comes out of cask. We put in our head, heart, and our hands because that's what makes the spirit. You have to think all the time of the process, what's going on. You get to feel how the distillery works and how hot and cold everything is running. Use your sound and your touch just to see how the process is going on. You see that from mashing to distillation, and even when it comes to fermentations, you're using your nose to make sure that the fermentation process is going well. The distillery itself, because it's so small, allows us to keep that handcrafted element because it does become more difficult as processes get bigger, but it also allows you to stay very in tune with what we need.
The craft of weaving is such a core part of Scottish heritage. It's not a craft that you can just do at home by yourself easily. It requires equipment, skill. You can't just sit and practice at home in front of TV. It's an intensely complex craft, and so keeping that alive. We've got 5 hand weavers, but people are surprised at how young they are, and it's trying to create space for them to have a place where they can come and weave is a huge passion for me. My name's Araminta Birse-Stewart. I'm the founder of Araminta Campbell, which is a woven textile business based in Scotland. Tweed and tartan is a historic fabric that's been around for generations. And I think part of that is due to the environment that we live in. It's a harsh environment, it's cold, and people were wearing wool fabrics from very early on in order to keep themselves warm and protect themselves from the environment. Traditionally, tweed is a cloth of the land and tartan is a cloth of the family. Tweed tends to be more informal and tartan more formal. Tartan, the vertical and horizontal, are always the same. They match up and they are clear blocks of colour. Tartan, there's more regimental aspects to it in terms of registering a tartan. Generally, you have at most 6 colours in a tartan, but you can also incorporate beautiful numerical references and story into a tartan, which is a key thing that we do within some of our projects. The design across the entirety of my work, whether it's for my own brand or for a client like the Five Farms, is very much about being out in the landscape and capturing elements of that landscape in the designs, whether it's the colours of the landscape, the motifs. And my aspiration is that when someone looks at the design in the landscape, they can see that they are paired together. The Five Farms is located in Benromach, which is a highland village in the centre of the Cairngorms National Park. And so there's a lot of different flora and fauna around which I've used as inspiration for the designs. The Cairngorm forest is green at all times of the year due to Scots pine trees, and that is a core part, but the different shades and tones of that, so you've got the dark green and then the forest green, and in the spring when the trees are growing, the new growth is this lime green. It's a lot about trying to capture moments which people don't see and they don't recognise in the landscape. For me, it's really important to create that connection between the design and the story behind it. It's not just where it's made and who's made it, but the story is why it looks the way it is. And I think the Five Farm does it beautifully with capturing the heritage of the place and the traditions and the history, rooting it in the craft and the skill of the land, but also executing it in a beautifully contemporary way. I've worked with natural plant dyes since I was 16. Initially, this was just purely from an interest of creating my own colours, but that interest has grown. Tweed and tartan, originally the colours will have come from natural plant dyes. So it's almost like I'm going back in history in order to sort of represent it in a new way. So my own collection of tartans, all of the colours I've originally obtained through natural plant dyes, and many of these I've foraged myself. I love going out, collecting plants from nature and seeing what colours they create. It's actually a process I often do with my sons. They call it mummies, potions, and we go out and we collect whether it's brambles or nettles, birch bark, anything from the landscape that we can get some colours from, and then we use wool to dye and get a fantastic range of colours which are then represented in my designs. Where possible, I use colours that I can forage, but I do also buy in dried dyes as well, whether it's indigo, alkanet, just in order to get that range of colours that I would like to capture in tartan. And this is very much part of the history. In the past, wealth was shown through having red through cochineal in your design, and I think there's a lovely symbolism in that I love to work with. But yeah, you can create a fantastic range, and I do it in a very experimental way. I'm not sort of prescriptive in my process at all. It's very organic and just really fun.
I think that my favourite thing about Scotland is the weather, the moderate climate. I like the clouds and the rain. I don't really mind that that's the majority of our year here.
That's why we make whiskey, it warms us up. Scotland is one of these little gems that you can spend one day at a beach, you can spend the next day in a hill in the Highlands, and you can get lost wherever you want to go. There's always something to do.
There's so much to see in Scotland, and people often just scrape the surface. Every different area has different things to see. The landscape's beautiful, the people, the craft that you see, it's a beautiful place.